No man's knowledge here can go beyond his experience. John Locke.
God is dead, he remains dead, and we have killed him. Friedrich Nietzsche.
Happiness is not an ideal of reason, but of imagination. Immanuel Kant.
I think, therefore I am. René Descartes.
Are you guys actually having a conversation here?
Yeah, of course we are. James has just established his own existence in a godless world.
Exactly, and Walt's elaborating on the premise that his experiences guide the doctrines that comprise his morality.
Right. Homer Simpson once said, I guess some people never change. Or they change quickly and then quickly change back. He also said, it's so simple to be wise. Just think of something stupid to say and then don't say it.
Yeah, but he also said you'll have to speak up, I'm wearing a towel.
Alright, well, I'll leave you to ponder that.
We won't.
Alright then, bye.
That guy. Yeah. Oh, wow. Did Homer have a point? God is dead, and we do change rapidly based on expectation instead of our own personal introspective thought, potentially in such an unspoken or instructed way influenced by societal norms and set expectations we don't actually even notice. Maybe wisdom is the unspoken.
Huh.
Many hours of pondering later.
Oh!
Stupid, sexy Stubbsy.
We have hit pretty much everything we need to reference at this point within our opening skits.
The Holy Trinity is
we've done
complete.
Star Wars, we've done The Grinch now.
We have. We've now done The Simpsons. Beautiful.
And also a guest in our house.
Yeah.
Wild.
A real feature of Walt's real housemate.
Actual housemate. Real.
who is not James.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast by the Greensboro Commander community. It's the GCP by the GCC and POG, Palms Off Gaming, sponsor of this podcast. We're all uniting forces to help you to have better games of Commander. I'm your host, Walt.
And hello, Commander players. I'm your other host, James. We got really philosophical in that skit, didn't we?
We
were
did.
Really pondering something.
I wonder what that might mean about the incoming transmission from the deep depths of the galaxy from the Space Commanders. It's time to get commanded.
On the rear side of every Magic the Gathering card, represented in the center of the frame, are 5 colored circular dots. Each of these represents an essential attribute without which our game could not exist. What is the meaning of color in this context? What does this mean for Commander? Be warned, this command shall be the first of many. Our cohort require an intimate understanding of your human mind and soul, and how each color in Magic the Gathering affects them.
That sounded really different.
It's
right?
definitely a Space Commander.
But, like, not the usual
No.
one.
I've never thought about it, but I guess we normally hear from, like a guy.
The head honcho, I assume?
I'm assuming gender here. Don't bite my head off, but
It's a deep voice.
He's resonant.
He, him pronouns. Do they even have pronouns, to be fair?
I don't know. But this one's
this is a different voice.
Different, very different. And kind of different vibe.
Also really concerned with, like, how we as humans perceive things. So clearly the Space Commanders are nowhere near human.
This raises more questions than it answers. But I guess we should dive right into what they want us to look at, which seems to be color in Magic the Gathering and sort of how it makes us feel.
And specifically what it means. And I think this is going to be... They said we're going to come back, so I'm assuming... They're going to want to know about all the colours. So we're probably going to come back to each colour individually, I assume.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I guess we should start off by just talking about colour philosophy in general.
I'm going to go right on a limb and say that I'm not super confident in, like, this... level of the game. It's not like a capacity that I at least consciously engage with very much.
Okay.
Not a lot.
You're like an English lit drama person.
I
Surely
know. It
that's
kind of shocks me as well. Like, I'm not very in touch with the story and this kind of thing.
Weirdly, I love the color philosophy aspect of our game.
Yeah,
I
I can
really
see
delve
that.
into it.
I can see that.
I love how it like can reflect, like, you know how I love the social aspect of Commander. This is like representing your own values by what colors you play.
I like that,
Yeah.
definitely. I just don't feel like I know a lot about it. I tell you what, why don't I take a little bit of a back seat?
Okay, sure.
You just give me your like initial thoughts, and I'll hop in later and give some. I'll hop in when I feel like it, but you're at the wheel. You're at the
Cool.
wheel.
All right.
I'm in the passenger seat.
I like this.
Take me along for wherever you're gonna go.
Sweet. Well, I mean, I have done a lot of reading on color philosophy, and weirdly, I think the Space Commanders must have been watching me recently when I listened to a bunch of Mark Rosewater's Driving to Work podcasts.
They are so strangely
They're
good.
Omnipotent, I think.
Sus.
But yeah, I've been listening to a lot of stuff by Mark Rosewater, reading a lot of articles that he's written about how color affects the game and all this kind of stuff.
Sure.
But I actually think before I dive into how colors in Magic mean something more than just separating certain things in the game, I kind of did want to just talk about what philosophy is really, really quickly.
Oh, sure.
Because I think some listeners might not actually know what philosophy is. Me and you, we watch like Philosophy Tube,
We
for
do.
example. Love her to bits. She's
Yes.
incredible.
Yep.
Link in the show notes, so I think big shout out.
Yep.
But obviously, philosophy is a really, really big concept. There's lots to cover.
It's arguably the oldest academic profession,
Yes,
really. Like the
100%.
oldest academic field. Funnily enough, something I discovered recently because my dad actually got his PhD.
Yeah. Congrats to your dad.
Oh, well, thank you. Dad, I don't know.
On behalf of your dad?
On behalf of my dad, I accept your thanks.
Just do pass it
On
on.
behalf of the household. No. PhD stands for Doctor of Philosophy.
Yes, yeah.
So it's interesting that no matter what topic you become a master in, because that's what it is to be a PhD,
Yeah.
you are always a Doctor of Philosophy. And I think actually, because I did an honours year at the end of my undergrad.
You've written a thesis.
I've written a thesis before. It was a really integral part of the thesis writing process was we actually learned a lot about how arguments are constructed and how evidence supports claims and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. That's actually like all of that has its roots in philosophy.
Yeah, I was actually about a couple of years ago offered to do my master's by research, which would then lead to a PhD in marketing.
Oh, there you go.
I turned it down because it was a master's by research, which means it's basically an unpaid job at the uni to do their research for them. Anyway, with all of that out the way,
Sure.
I've written down something that I think I'm just going to read as it is,
Sounds
because
good.
I think it's a pretty good way of breaking down what philosophy is if you're unintroduced.
Sure.
So, philosophy is an academic process of systemizing, conceptualizing, or even attempting to answer fundamental questions about our existence. Questions on our existence itself, like, why are we here? Questions on morality, like, what is good and bad? Or even, is it okay to lie? Questions on our values. I'm sure anyone who's ever taken a philosophy class has heard of the trolley problem. Yeah, it's a deep one. Google it if you've got some free time and want to ponder something deeply for a while. But it's very wide field. Philosophy discusses languages, it discusses love, knowledge of fact versus understanding, and everything in between.
It's a really, really amazing field. I think that basically everyone could benefit from having at least a rudimentary understanding of philosophy, because it makes you realize that pretty much everything that we think and believe has its roots. Like someone somewhere in the philosophy
Has
field
almost thought of it before.
before. It's quite validating in the same way that sometimes when someone says like, oh, you know, I feel self-conscious about that thing as well, and you get that sort of warm, fuzzy feeling of going like, oh, I'm not alone. Philosophy is a lot of that, where you read this complex question someone's asked in like ancient Greece, and you're kind of like, oh my god, even then they were thinking, what does it all mean?
Yeah.
What's it all about? Why
Where's
are we
my
here?
place in all this?
Am I obliged to be a good person? Like, all of these questions remain relevant today, and philosophy's so fun for that reason.
It's such a shared experience in humans, and I encourage you guys. I think Philosophy Tube is a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. But it's such a shared experience among humans. It ties into everything, doesn't it? And it ties into Commander, which is what the Space Commanders want to know about how color affects how we think about certain values. So, to think about how philosophy affects Magic the Gathering, we're going to have to do a bit of a travel back in time situation.
Always happy to do that.
So,
you know I loved my Stacks research episode.
Yes. Well, I'm going to tell a little bit of a story that Mark Rosewater is very consistent in sharing this about Richard Garfield and the creation of Magic the Gathering.
Wow, way back.
Yeah, so way back when, right to the start of our game, before Commander was even a thought in Sheldon's mind, this was what Mark Rosewater believes Richard Garfield's greatest 3 fundamental pillars that the game stood on.
Sure.
So the 3 biggest pillars that the game stood on was the trading card game genre in itself.
Mm-hmm.
It is like the first of its kind.
Sure.
The mana system was another thing that was one of these massive pillars. It's the resource management aspect of our game.
We talked about this a lot in the last episode on Mana
On the
Curve.
Mana Curve, yep. Big influence of how this game is actually played.
Sure.
But the last one was the color pie.
Right.
So the color pie, as the Space Commanders alluded to, is the 5 colors of Magic arranged specifically in that way on the back of the Magic card.
We often say Wooburg, which
Wooburg.
is white, blue, black, red, green. In
Correct.
order. Yep.
So basically, the reason why this was such a fundamental pillar for Magic to stand on was when Richard was creating Magic and when he was thinking about like, okay, these are the types of things I want the game to do. One of the biggest problems that any game designer comes across is how do you separate out the game's mechanics, the way that the game works.
I mean, even in video games, you can think about, like, even in shooter games, which are theoretically quite simple, you end up separating powers by, well, the very conventional thing these days is, like, heroes, right? Like, if you play Overwatch, like, the different characters, you know, Winston's got powers, and that character's got different powers, and Widow's got powers, and that's how they kind of, like, break the game into its compartments.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Wow,
So
interesting. So even back then, they were aware that this is something they had to do.
Exactly. So even way back when, Richard Garfield was like, okay, well, if I just create a system of mana that allows you to, like, incrementally get more money to spend on spells, if a card goes in every single deck, it's broken, right?
Yeah.
Hilarious to me that Richard Garfield knew this when he was creating Magic the Gathering, yet Wizards of the Coast is now just printing cards that do go in every single deck.
Another episode, that one.
Yeah, a whole other topic of conversation. So, obviously, Richard Garfield had created this color pie to separate how the spells would sit in certain camps.
Right.
And thematically, he was really excited by this prospect of different types of mages using different types of magic.
Right.
So, like the water mage with water magic, and the fire mage using fire magic, and the holy one bringing light magic, and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
So, look, he did, admittedly, a huge review of literature. Like, he did a massive read of, like, all these different types of representations of magic users and where their magic comes from and how it's represented in the books.
Sure.
Which, in fairness, comes across quite strongly in the game of Magic the Gathering, in the art and all that kind of stuff.
That's definitely remained consistent across Magic's history. I'll agree with that.
Yeah, so eventually he ended up with 5 theologies or ideologies, I'm calling them, of where these magic camps sat.
Right, and this was related to, like, sort of where people drew their power from.
And what type of power they exuded, like what actually they cast, what did.
He was kind of like, okay, I can see this collection of stories use this particular type of magic in this way. Wow, and so he broke it down to those 5 camps.
Yeah, and interestingly, obviously, like maybe he might not have been as thoughtful about this, but Maro actually talks about how the fact that the number 5, from a marketing perspective, is actually really crucial.
Right.
It's very attractive to the eye, the number 5. When something's odd, but also kind of symmetrical. See how, like, if you look at the Magic the Gathering back of the card, if you draw a line right down the middle, it is symmetrical. They look the same on either side.
Yeah,
right?
It's like almost an exact pentagon, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. And pentagram, obviously, that satanic imagery that caused all the disruption.
That's another story.
A totally other story.
Yes.
But the number 5 kind of attracts you because it looks symmetrical, but there's something interesting about it.
Sure.
Right? It's the odd number aspect. And I think that 3 was too little amounts of camps to separate magic into.
Sure. And 4 had that too much symmetry going on.
Too much symmetry.
Interesting.
Yet 5 allowed this really unique kind of asymmetry aspect to it, which allowed for some really interesting stuff that we'll talk about later with enemy colors and stuff like that.
Oh, that is really relevant in that, actually. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Also, just as a quick tangent, look, we as humans have been obsessed with color for a really, really long time. You'd said philosophy is there's ancient Greeks that go far back, to think about certain things of what I mentioned before about why are we all here. But color, weirdly, has also been a part of that philosophy for a really long time. Aristotle was actually one of the first people to give any kind of meaning to color.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
What was his kind of slant? Like, what was he trying to describe about color?
So he believed that God sent light and dark to create elements on Earth. And if you've ever watched Avatar, he believed that the 4 elements were earth, water, fire, and air.
Until one day, the Fire Nation attacked.
And the world was never the same. But, that's what he believed. He believed that God sent light and dark, so 2, colours, I guess you could, shades, to create these 4 colours, which built everything. So he actually believed that colour created everything.
Wow.
Fast forward, 2,000 years later, Isaac Newton actually began doing scientific experiments on light and on colour. And he actually proved... Funny side story to this as well. I've actually been in the very room in which he discovered this.
Ooh.
To Isaac Newton's house in the Midlands in England.
Wow, that's exciting.
So he proved that light actually consisted of 7 colours. It's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and indigo and violet. So if you've ever seen the album artwork for Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd...
It's ripped straight from the textbook, right?
Literally from any science textbook, ripped out the page, slapped on it. And of course, since then, we've discovered that, there are wavelengths of light that are electromagnetic and, there are infrareds and, infrapurples at this point. It's really complicated.
Ultraviolet light, which we call UV, which
is
is what gives us sunburn and various other different things, is literally, light that is so far along the violet side of the color spectrum that it no longer becomes detectable to the human eye.
Yeah, and we can then create really cool little spy gadgets where we can write in secret ink. Do you remember those toys?
I do remember those toys.
They were really cool.
There was also, I mean, it's interesting. It's probably a big old tangent, but it's interesting thinking about that we conceptualize everything we know about color based on the color that we can see with our eyes. But when they do, when they look at, because they can compare our perception of light with other species by looking at the specific receptors in our eyes that can receive red, green, and blue light, which is why we have RGB lighting that can produce all the colors we can see. So when they look at other species of animal and plant, animals, the way that they work out how much color they think they can see is how many more receptors they have than us.
Oh, wow.
So for instance, I don't know if you've heard any of the wild stories about the mantis shrimp. Have you heard about the mantis shrimp?
The what?
It is this bizarre-looking little crustacean man who lives at the bottom of the ocean. We have 3 color receptors in our eyes.
Yeah.
Mantis shrimp have 16.
Whoa.
Or something like that. They are almost certain they can see.
But they live at the bottom of the ocean.
Well,
where there's nearly no light.
There's almost no light, so the light they need to see more of it because there's so little to see.
Gotcha.
I think that's the theory that they have.
Interesting.
Lots of wild things about mantis shrimp. They famously can't be kept in captivity because their forelimbs, when they strike something, the way that they eat animals is they hit stuff, they hide in hiding and then hit a crab and basically shatter the crab because
one punch.
their 4 limbs move so quickly that it creates it boils the water in the air and you can see, they're called cavitation bubbles when they strike an object. If you keep one in an aquarium, it will break the aquarium glass no matter how thick it is because that's how strong. Anyway, complete
what a side tangent.
But yeah, the mantis shrimp is something else.
Okay, well, coming back to colour in Magic the Gathering, considering we've been obsessed with colour for such a long time, philosophers and scientists have given meaning to colour.
Yeah.
And obviously in literature, when Garfield was looking at it, even in literature, colour has been such a thing that, that joke of every English classroom of, what did the red curtains mean in this scene, kids?
Well, even when we go back to some of the origins of fantasy, like Lord of the the Rings, Gandalf famously is Gandalf the Grey and comes back as Gandalf the White. So
what does that mean? What does it mean?
It's interesting.
Yeah.
It creates a sort of structure with which to view a foreign world, I suppose.
Exactly. And it allows us as humans to have this shared experience of philosophy and understanding to get what people are trying to say through literature.
It's like shorthand. Yeah.
100%. So when we look when we look into the colors of magic, we actually end up seeing that each color wants something or has a goal or is motivated by something in some way.
Right.
Do you see what I'm trying to say here? They have like a desire. So each color has a strong like attraction to something and will, by its nature, implement certain strategies or approach certain problems in particular ways to obtain its wants or get its objectives or whatever.
I think I see this in the cards. What's White's goal?
Well, I mean, this is the cool thing. I think we're going to come back to each of these colors individually in later episodes.
Oh, yeah. They specifically said they wanted to do that. The Space Commander said that. Yeah, okay.
So maybe when we come back in future episodes, I'll
do
break
the deep
down.
Dive.
Yeah, we'll go deep dive. But
sounds good.
I think it's a pretty fair thing to go through each color and have a bit of a gander.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's go through Wooburg. You wanted white. Well, white has a very big focus on wanting peace. It wants structure.
Yep.
It tends to put laws in place. It's very selfless and it wants equality. They're like the main things that white wants.
Oh, yeah. I can see that in sort of the artistic depictions on the cards and the way, even thematically, how they work. Like, yeah I see that.
I'll break that down in like the mechanics that come up in cards.
Sounds
but
good.
like, its goal is to have peace granted via unity of all.
Sure.
It's that togetherness.
Yeah,
right?
Gotcha.
Now, blue, going around Wooburg, blue has very different wants and needs. It's knowledge, deceit, even caution, deliberation, perfection is something that comes up in blue quite a bit. So its goal is progression, but backed up by knowledge and insight. That's its goal.
There's definitely a super strong feeling of playing blue about knowledge. I mean, the cards that we draw from...
Thirst for knowledge.
Well,
right?
yeah, but the cards we draw from are called the library, and no color draws more knowledge from the library than blue.
There you go. So progression by knowledge and insight.
Seeking more and more knowledge. Yeah, cool.
All right, so working our way around, we've got black. Black is pretty cool. Black is all about power and self-interest, usually. We see themes of like death and sacrifice, but tends to be wanting to be completely uninhibited. Its goal is progression, similar to blues, but it's at any expense, even at the cost of itself or others. It's this self-interest drive.
I'm immediately reminded of an old Magic card. I think it was in one of the starter decks in like 1999. I don't know if you know that set. It's got like a star symbol as the set symbol.
No, I don't.
Anyway, it's a card I used to play in my Obosh deck called Ambition's Cost. Which is,
well, there you go.
for 3 and a black, you draw 3 cards and lose 3 life. So it's interesting, the parallel to blue, like it's still seeking power and progression, but it's at a cost of your life and, literally the cost of ambition, which is to deal some damage to you.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Well, moving round the color wheel, in a similar vein of black, red craves this, like, impulse of ability to act on one's own impulses in a very freedom, emotional driven sense, and often doesn't really mind if the path is filled with destruction.
Yeah, I think of chaos when I think of red.
Yeah, I mean, Chaos Warp, red staple.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Good one.
So its goal is like pure freedom gained by completely shattering the chains of whatever the heck is binding it at the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. And what about green?
So green is actually pretty on the nose, to be honest.
Yep.
It's about nature, wildlife, being quite spiritual, being connected. Tradition is also kind of connected with green in a couple of different instances.
Yeah, I see that.
But its goal is growth only in a natural way. It wants to let things lie the way they are and kind of grow with itself, not try and influence it in any way. I'm moving my body about in a bit of a weird way in a studio right now.
Its head's doing that sort of bopping side to side thing where
look like a crab walking side to side.
Careful, a mantis shrimp will get you.
Yeah, that's terrified of these things now, I'm not going to lie. It can shatter aquarium glass.
Yes.
Terrifying.
Very small, thankfully, so probably wouldn't want to shatter your skull, but I'm not going to speak for Manda Shrimp. I think they should speak for themselves.
I'm more scared of swimming in oceans from that reason.
Our emails are open to any and all Manda Shrimp out there who wish to get in touch. The email's in the show notes.
We will give you a platform. Share your side of the story.
We want to hear from you. We're talking about the 5 colours of magic. We want to hear about the other 10 colours that you play when you play Magic.
Commando at the depths of the sea. So does that give you an idea of, like, the colours wanting something in their goal?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can see that. Like, the sort of way... I'm thinking of the mana curve because it's the last episode we did, but the way that your deck feels like it builds towards a goal, especially when you use chain spells together, and especially when you're playing a mono-coloured deck, you sort of have this feeling of this impending, this gathering energy.
Where it's getting to,
and
right?
it's heading somewhere, yeah. And I definitely feel like, even thinking just specifically of green, I just built a mono-green deck.
Yeah, well, kind of give me the rundown of that mono green deck in how it progresses its game plan with the lens of it wants to grow naturally in this natural way and build to a sense of big strength. And
there's a sense with green. The deck that I'm building is a +1 counters deck. It's headed by Mowu, Loyal Companion.
Good boy.
The goodest boy in the multiverse.
Boy.
The only interdimensional dog, as far as I'm aware. My Moxfield deck is actually called The Disreputable Dog, which is a reference to a fantasy series. If you've read it, it's by Garth Nix. There's basically an interdimensional dog in that
that's
series
super cute.
called The Disreputable Dog.
Also, link in the show notes. Go check this deck out if you want to have a look at it.
It's a good one. But yeah, like when I play it, because I've been playtesting it on Moxfield, there's sort of this feeling of the growth and the way that each living thing, because it's very creature based, each living thing that you are bringing into the world is contributing to the growth of all of the things. And so you have this feeling of like, as this creature comes in, it's gaining the power offered by this other creature, and then collectively they're gaining this other power. And like, especially when you start stacking +1 counters on top of each other, it's like, wow, the growth is exponential, and like the nature can't be stopped, basically.
Yeah.
But equally, I can imagine a world where someone board wipes and the creatures are taken away from me, and in the same way that, you know, like without...
Deforestation comes by.
Well, kind of. Like, you know, without the living things that comprise the mana, like mana is literally energy, you know, the forest can't thrive. And so, yeah, that's kind of the feeling that I have, is like together the creatures and beings become stronger, but then as they diminish, so too does the power that comes from them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of encapsulating a mono green deck, is the Mowu deck for sure. And I'm not sure if you noticed, as I kind of went round the color pie there, I said like similar to blue, black wants this, and then similar to this, black, as I went around the wheel. Now, generally the colors that sit next to each other share something in common.
We call them allied colors, right?
We do.
When we're talking about, especially when they talk about like limited formats, they say like, this is an enemy colors format.
Yes.
Because the archetypes that they create for limited, for the draft, are associated with enemy colors, which I'm guessing are the ones that are across the color wheel from one another.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at that back of that magic card, like white is next to blue and next to green on the other side.
These ones share philosophies.
So they're the allies, but then the enemies of white would be white, blue, black, and red, right?
Correct.
Because they're on the other side of the color wheel.
So using that as an example, we can obviously see that white shares this like progression value with blue, in that it's trying to like grow something by loyalty and peace, and it shares that with green in the way that you just described before. Your creatures combined make a stronger thing. So white sees that in green and goes, oh, I like you, you're a friend. But then looking across the way, it looks at black and red, who are, I want to be free of everyone, and I am self-driven, and even if it costs others' life, I will do it for myself.
Sure.
And do you see how red and black kind of like that about each other?
Yeah, totally. Something I've only just clocked. I've been aware of the enemy-ally thing for a little while, which I think is really cool, by the way. You can look at the back of a Magic card and you can begin to dissect the game. I think that's such a cool aspect of Magic.
Very cool.
But one thing I've never thought about before is the fact that when you look at the enemies of a particular color, the two enemies are always allies.
Yeah.
Because there's only 5 of them.
They share something in common.
And that's almost the source of, well, in the case of white at least, it seemed like that was the source of the conflict, was like black and red share selfish uninhibited ambition, and white is like, no, I sit at selflessness and harmony, and I think you are at odds with my goals.
Correct.
Interesting.
But then, like, you know, to kind of combine, like, red and green, what do they see in each other? Well, they see this, like, wild aspect of growth.
Sure.
Red sees this, like, uninhibited grow, be better and better and better. And green looks at that and goes, oh, yeah, no, I like that. You're letting things grow naturally. Do you see how you really can, once you understand what each color wants individually, you can start to see why they hate the other color and love another color.
That's so interesting.
It's really cool. So yeah, like Walt said, if you're interested in kind of lining them up, just turn any of your magic cards on the back and you can identify which are allies and which are enemies. But a great way to identify you as an ally would be a rainbow pin on your lanyard at work.
I saw it written down and I still loved it so much.
Walt and I are both strong allies and members of the LGBTQI plus community, so gotta throw that rainbow reference in the colour philosophy episode.
I love it. I mean, funnily enough, on like the denim jacket that a lot of people will see me wear at the store, I mean, I wear a couple and they have different things on them, but I have... On my pin, I have a rainbow lanyard pin, and I also have a Selesnya pin.
There you go. Allies and colours.
Yeah, allied colours. There you go.
There you go.
Beautiful.
Well, look, I'm really hoping that this has given you a really good insight into the colours and how they kind of epitomise themselves in the cards. Because you even, as I started talking about green, you kind of went into this, oh yeah, my Mowu deck does this because it like does this, but if it board wipes, it's like really hard to get back because of what the color wanted to do.
I'm kind of realizing that like unconsciously as I'm building decks, I'm kind of leaning into these ideas that I'm seeing. And it's funny, like I'll be completely honest, I'm someone who has never read any of the Magic story. Like I'm aware of it through the cards, and people have told me about the cards. I've occasionally gone on the Magic wiki and read about stuff.
Like the blurb stuff.
Yeah, like
summaries
and stuff, which I find interesting. Like I read about Mowu because I thought that was like such a cool story.
I didn't know he was an interdimensional pup.
Incredible. But it's interesting as I'm thinking about green and the colors, I'm realizing that actually I have internalized some of this because it's like it's inherent narrative, right? It creates inherent narrative, and I think that the characters that we see in the story, and I'm again out of my comfort zone here, but the characters we see in the story, and especially the Planeswalkers, when I'm on the MTG wiki, they say something interesting about Planeswalkers where they say. Even about Planeswalkers who are typically depicted as like multicolored cards, they say like character is centered in blue mana will be something that they will say. And as you were describing like the particular sort of almost like personality traits of white and blue and black and red and green, I was thinking of the Planeswalkers I associate with those colors.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so who do you think of when you think of white?
May he rest in peace.
Oh, Gideon?
Oh, yeah. Gideon, the boy, who is staunch defender of all things good, fiercely loyal, the Hufflepuff of the Gatewatch.
He is totally the Hufflepuff of the Gatewatch. He's like, no, I just want to be a good guy.
Also the Captain America of the Gatewatch, if we're real, you know? Just like, no matter what, I will stand for what's right.
God bless this multiverse.
But it's interesting that I actually... I was a bit sneaky, and I did open this email in advance, and I did a little bit of searching. I was curious as to which Planeswalkers. I was trying to think of ones off the top of my head, and then I was like, I'm just going to search which Planeswalkers are restricted to specific colors. So not colorless Planeswalkers, and not Planeswalkers that are multicolored. So
that are centered in those colors and don't have any other color identity.
Exactly right.
Okay,
so I did a Scryfall search for each of the colors, and I eliminated colorless and I eliminated other color identities.
This is such a Spike thing to do on philosophy. How have you managed to turn philosophy into a Scryfall search with syntax code?
But I was interested to see like which characters recurred most in colors, and I was relieved to see that the ones that popped into my mind were the ones that were most represented. But there were others that saw a lot of representation. So Gideon is the most comfortably has the most mono white Planeswalker cards.
Yeah, 100%.
Which makes sense. That's very him. Yeah. But Ajani has several. He's had some green-white printings and some red-white printings, and is now very sadly completed.
That red-white printing was brutal.
Really cool.
Super strong.
Destroyed a bunch of lands, right?
Yeah. disgusting.
Yeah, but really, really cool. And yeah, when I was thinking, so I went through that White was Gideon. I was like, okay, that makes sense. I was also thinking of Ajani, but I was like, no, actually Gideon, I can see that.
Definitely white.
The quintessential white thing. Jace was the most common blue planeswalker.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. He was like comfortably ahead in blue. Black was Liliana, again, pretty comfortably. There were quite a few Ob Nixilis cards, and Sorin was the other one.
Sorin, yeah.
Interesting that all of these characters in my mind share ambition.
Yeah,
is the one thing they definitely have in common.
And it's selfish ambition.
Yes.
Like Liliana wants to give up, parts of her soul to get contracts with demons in the story.
For more power.
Yeah, exactly.
It's power at any cost. Ambitions cost the card. It's all coming together. Chandra was the most printed red one, but there was also a couple of Jaya, maybe one Jaya planeswalker, maybe two Jaya
There's a couple of
planeswalkers.
Jayas.
Yeah.
There's also Jessica's.
Jessica's red, but Chandra was again like pretty comfortable.
Definitely the most
lead.
planeswalker cards,
Yeah.
for sure.
And then green, this was the closest one, I think. Nista is the most printed green planeswalker.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, this is the Gatewatch, literally. All these 5+5 characters.
She also, in Zendikar Rising, did get a black-green card as well.
Shattered Bows, that's true. But yeah, the closest, very close behind Nissa in green was Garrick, which is interesting because I feel Garrick really embodies that like bestial quality of green. But yeah, like I when I was running through these characters in my mind, even with my super limited knowledge of the story and of these characters and what they've done and been through, I was like, yeah, I kind of see it. Chandra is kind of like free and a bit rebellious and a bit unstoppable, and Jace is very like, I know everything,
and I will know everything.
Yes.
I will eventually know everything. If I don't know something, I'll know. Yeah,
just give me enough time. I will learn it, and then I will defeat you. And yeah, like Nissa is like the forests.
Yeah.
Almost all cards that I've seen of Nissa as a planeswalker. And planeswalkers have such an interesting role in a game of Magic because they sit there and actively move in the game. Like, creatures can gain power and lose power, but it's very tied to your power. Whereas you can almost feel with a planeswalker the way that they are moving
independently. It's like you're calling in a friend to help you. I mean, way back when, the whole, like, canon thing of our game was that we as players were planeswalkers.
Yeah, originally.
And we used to call in planeswalkers to help us fight our battles. So like it'd be like me and you planeswalking and having our battle in amongst the planes. Yeah. And then me being like, hey yo, Jace, come help me out in this battle. And he's like, I got you, man. Rah. Like
No,
imagine that's how Jace talks too. Like, I got you, man. It
gives me strong jock vibes, for sure. No, but like Nissa almost always interacts with forests specifically, which really speaks to that way that green is so tied to its own mana, like so intrinsically tied to the forest and to the natural world. Yeah. But then there are these other planeswalkers that sit at the ally and enemy color like intersections, and they do sit in that pocket between the two places. Nicol Bolas.
I was actually just about to say my favorite planeswalker, Nicol Bolas.
I'm not shocked at all to learn that, given you are the Grixis man.
The Grixis player. And like when you combine red, blue, and black, you get this, I am so self-ambitious that I will break anything that stops me to get all the power I want, but I'm going to do it based on the information I have, and I will seek the information that I need to get there.
Yeah, I mean, again, if we think about what it's opposite, Grixis is opposite white and green, which, as we said, is really about harmony. So, yeah, to me, Grixis says, like, no, to hell with harmony, I've got this.
Yeah, like, don't stand back, but hold my beer kind of vibes.
Exactly right. And that's how Nicol Bolas is in the story. He says, I am the one,
I will be the
I am the god pharaoh. Like, that's his role in the story. And yeah, like, Vraska, who was also completed. God, it's also sad.
Doesn't read the story, is crying over planeswalkers getting completed.
I'm a sensitive boy, okay? Vraska is really about that Golgari sense of, there's a natural progression and like decay to all things. All things will die and bring new life. And there's that sort of sense of that in her cards. Kaya sits at the white-black intersection.
Yeah, a lot of people look at white-black and go, oh, this is the battle between good and evil, right? I get a little bit offended when I hear this because it's not. It's a very easy thing to say, oh, black is bad and white is good. However, white and black, especially when you look at Kaya, what does she want? She wants this control over all. She's wants to hold a bit of a dominion. She still wants people to be together, but she's going to be the one to control it. And even like if you look at the Orzhov Syndicate on Ravnica,
I was just going to say, my understanding of them is they're
the bank.
Yeah,
they're the bank on Ravnica.
Yeah,
what does that tell you? There's some comments on society on Ravnica, and obviously, I think the Space Commanders are pretty obsessed with color. I feel like once we do all Wooburg, we probably will visit the plane of Ravnica and we'll have to talk about the two colours.
We'll have to. I think the only other thing that I did want to mention when I was doing that Scryfall search specifically is I had to add the term minus color identity colorless, because when I was searching, legal Commander color identity white cards, there were two other planeswalkers who were popping up because they're colorless, and colorless, funnily enough, does not represent an absence of the mana of magic. It actually represents a mastery over all forms of magic. And I was reading about their specific things because it's Ugin and Khan.
Oh, Eugene,
Nico Bolas' brother, and Khan, the Silver Golem,
created by Urza himself.
Yeah, but both of them epitomize this, like, they have true mastery over all, basically.
Yeah.
And the strongest indicator of that power is that they... Yeah, like, funnily enough, combining all the colours of magic, almost like that experiment with Isaac Newton.
Splits them
all colours of light
prism.
Come from white, the pure, bright light. Yeah. And I know we have white in magic, but white's more like
but
yellow.
the light. Less
yeah.
white,
That's
more
true.
light,
yes.
But yeah, like, even in the card art, when you look at Ugin, he's very, like... He's almost exuding that light. And if you look at Khan, he's, like, often standing next to a globe, which is like, it's this very like over dominion kind of umbrella feeling on the cards.
Oh man, I am like super excited for the future episodes of this where we dive into the specific colours. Look, we've been talking for a little while. Should we have a little thrifty interlude?
So let's have a thrifty interlude. We've clearly got lots left to cover. We still have to go into how the colours affect the actual game mechanics on the card.
Yeah, we've
alluded to it a little bit.
We have a Commander podcast after all.
So we're going to talk about the game mechanics, and we're also actually going to specifically talk about Commander with these colours and how colours will affect our format, which is Commander.
Yeah, beautiful. So before that, we do have to hear a little something about a new thrifty card. So I will be doing a dramatic monologue of this one, or, car salesman, as James likes to call it. Do you want to read them the card that I'll be featuring this week?
Yeah, it's an interesting choice because this is a colourless card.
Oh, true mastery, you might say.
Of all that it holds. And this week's, I'm stumbling over this because I'm excited with this card. But it's Crashing Drawbridge. For 2 generic mana, you'll get an artifact creature wall with Defender that taps, and creatures you control gain haste until end of turn.
I think it's an 0/3. I realised I didn't write that down.
Something like that.
It's got Defender. It's 0 something.
You're never going to attack with this. Power toughness is for blockers.
Did you ever lock your bedroom door as a young grommet? I didn't. My door didn't have a lock. Let's fantasize then about a huge locked door. The door of an impenetrable fortress surrounded by a gaping moat filled with snakes and snack wrappers. A door that we could open in an instant to charge out in the living room, scaring the bejesus out of Nan. That door is real. A real fictional cardboard real door. What's that? Red is the fastest colour of magic? Wrong! Red is stop signs, you silly coot! The fastest colour is... no colour at all. Dark matter moves faster than light, and it's coming closer, inexorably bringing the doom of all things. Like that bloody drawbridge! Get president!
My favourite reference was the snack wrappers. That's if anyone's listening from outside Australia, they won't know what snack is.
They're like these the weird little, like, you peel the top. like kid snacks.
Yeah, it's got
They
like
have,
crackers
like,
and like a
5 crackers
Yeah.
and then like a really horrible cheese dip.
like grossly yucky.
Completely
Yeah.
like the texture of snot was
Yeah.
the Ugh.
Also, wow, what a choice of card for this episode. You broke the color pie, being like red not fastest.
Red not fastest.
Red not go. Red stop.
No,
Red stop.
It's all about the door, all right? The real fictional cardboard real
It's
door.
real.
Yeah.
It's real.
You can catch these zany posts as they come out on Discord as in text form every Thursday in the Thrifty Thursdays channel. The Discord server is linked in the show notes, and you can see me make some of these into videos over on TikTok at _Commander Community. So chuck us a follow on there to see them as they come out.
Yeah, and also the highlights from this show are hosted on that TikTok. They're really funny.
There have been some good ones.
We've hired a cool editor to put some of these zany moments of Walt and I together.
We like it a lot. We like it a lot. Let's get back to the color philosophy?
Pie?
The pie. The
color pie?
The color pie.
The philosophy of pie.
Sure. I think
3.1417.
we sort of covered like the real philosophy part of it. So are we sort of diving into the game part of it now?
I wanted to give like a good like foundation for us to even approach this. So we now understand like what each color wants. Okay, how do these philosophies, what each color wants, actually drive the game of Magic? What effects do these colors have in game?
Sure.
It's really interesting when you actually, if you go back, rewind our podcast episode to the start and replace a couple of words in what we're saying, you can actually just find out.
Okay.
If you replace the word goal, when I talked about like the goal of the color or the objective of the color, if you replace that with win con card,
that's the goal.
Idea.
Yeah.
I want to collectively get a group of things, and then my win con card is to run over a bunch of people with a wide board, right? You can even replace like resources with that actually is resources, that one.
Sure.
It's got resources that it uses.
Yep.
And green obviously is like centered in like this growth of mana, but black might use its life as a resource.
Yeah.
Do you see how like each color might even go about the way it implements its strategies based on what resources it has?
Gotcha.
So, all right, should we break it down color by color?
Yeah, let's do it. So we're talking now about like the mechanics that each color has that sort of represent the philosophy of it. So we're going to do Wooburg again. So white first.
Right at the top. What do you think white has in its colors that epitomize the philosophy, almost personify it, or give it some kind of in-game relevance to what white as a color wants to do?
I mean, we have a mechanic that's based on like the first card that does this, which is the Anthem. Yeah. Which is this idea of the collective power of the forces, basically, getting stronger as a unified thing. So, like, the first card, I believe, is Glorious Anthem.
Yeah, 1 white and a white, creatures get +1/+1.
Yeah,
that you control.
Creatures you control get +1/+1. So, that to me really epitomizes this, like, coming together and, like, strength in numbers, which I feel is really, like, a key part of White's thing. In a similar vein, a lot of the decks I build are token decks.
What do they share in common? Well...
They're white.
They're white.
Like this concept of creatures bringing, like, a creature that enters the battlefield and makes tokens is sort of like reinforcements. Yeah. Right? That's how I read it, at least. And so, like, this idea, and a lot of the cards that do this are like soldiers and spirits and stuff that have a collective power.
Yeah, I also like the idea that when you're thinking about token strategy decks, a 1/1 human soldier token is nothing by itself. But when you have a spin down dice on it at 20, and that dice represents there are 20 of these 1/1s, that is a lot scarier than a single 1/1.
I mean, the game, in the form of power toughness, controls for this, right?
Exactly right.
You can have a 15/15 on your board, but if someone attacks you with 20 of them, that creature can only block one of those creatures.
Exactly.
And in the opposite scenario, even a 20/20, if you swing into a board and someone has 21 blockers, even if they're 1/1s, if they block with all of those creatures, your creature dies.
Yep. The power of the many overfells the mighty.
Yeah, I definitely see that in white.
I
Yeah.
also think life gain is a mechanic that white does really strong.
In almost every set, white
Yeah.
has some way of gaining life.
I also really like generally how white goes about life gain. White has a lot of, like, for example, in your Marchesa deck, you run Daxos, Blessed by the Sun.
Yes.
Which has a life gain ability, but it happens when a creature ETBs under your control, you gain a life.
Or dies.
Interestingly. So interesting, like, and then another example of this would be Impassioned Orator. That's the 2 and a white for the same effect. ETB, you gain a life. How much of white's philosophy comes into that when it's like, okay, I'm gaining benefit from gathering people together for a common cause.
Yeah.
The more people I bring onto my battlefield, the more life I gain.
And like the life sort of prolongs the game almost. So it's sort of like and is your resource of your like vitality. And so by being part of a force that is many and strong, you almost are granted longevity as a result.
It's cool how it plays in. You can think of other mechanics on white as well, like protection, I think is a really good thing that white does.
White does a lot of, like, specifically, protection from red or protection from black and like that kind of thing.
Or even the quintessential protection card itself, Teferi's protection, is a white card.
Literally, I am safe, you cannot touch me kind of thing.
Build my walls up kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting though, I almost go the other way as well on white, where white has the most wrath effects of any color.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting. And the earliest cards that we point to in white, like the origin of the word wrath as a term to describe a board wipe is the card Wrath of God.
Yeah.
Followed up quite shortly after with the almost mechanically identical Day of Judgment, I think it's called.
Exactly the same card mechanically, different name.
Both of which give like very obviously overtly religious,
Wrath of God.
like this the you all shall suffer for what has occurred or whatever, which is kind of I think this is sort of the clear, this to me is why white is not good. That white is not the same thing as the powers of good and the moral good in the world, because white is also the color of like retribution and judgment. And those are, like they may come from like to the white player and maybe to white the color, they go, no, that this was just, this is what was meant to be. This was meant to be. This is the way forward. It's kind of deciding the fate of others, and it's saying, no, if you shall not be one with us, you are to be destroyed, literally destroyed.
And even like when you think about like the best removal spells in our format, Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshares, these are like the quintessential removal spells. But it's like, this thing doesn't align with what I want to do and the things that I'm building in my city. So I'm going to exile it permanently from existence. You are not conforming to my rules. And I think that's another thing. Rules is what white is really good at. Rule of law, tax effects, like Smothering Tithe. It's this very like, you will come to this like middle ground and play in my game.
And if you won't, then
you're gone.
Then you'll
and you will suffer.
There'll be retribution. Absolutely.
All right. Well, moving round the color pie.
Sure.
Blue. What are the things that you think blue? You actually have already said one.
Card draw, I think, is like immediately what comes to mind for me with blue. Because it is about this like seeking knowledge, and specifically as well. It's not just because yes, blue draws a lot of cards, but it also has a lot of ways to manipulate the top of your library, and a lot of the
brainstorm,
cards,
ponder.
Well, and you can even look at the names that they use for these cards: ponder, preordain. Portent, even the weird budget.
Thrifty Thursdays All-Star.
Exactly. Basically budget ponder. That portent means a sign of things to come. Blue has a lot of control over fate and time.
Even extra turn spells.
Extra turn spells. Almost every single extra turn spell is blue. Every other one has like very, very strong downside, usually with the words "you lose the game if you don't do this" written on it. But blue says, I have time, I will consider all the options. And so you feel that in the experience of playing blue.
I also think that like this I've got all knowledge and understanding. I think there's like the other side of the blue coin, which is I am better than you because I have more understanding.
This is almost the insidious side of blue.
Yeah, so this is where I think counter spells and like control magic come into this. Like we've got like enchantment auras in blue that says you gain control of target enchanted creature.
Yeah.
And counter spells, just target counter spell. You knew more that, like for example, one of the counter spells in our game is called Saw It Coming.
Yeah.
That spell is literally like, I'm smarter than you.
I love that card conceptually. I also really like the art on that card.
Yeah.
It's very blue, actually, to me, in that it's this kind of... You see this a lot with cards that feature Jace. It's this nonchalant, like, oh, is that the best you can do?
Is that the best you've got?
Yeah. I think Blue Elemental Blast, there's a printing that has a Jace quote that's something like... It's basically like, is that all you can muster?
Yeah.
You know? And that's the impression that you get of blue is, yeah, like...
It's almost like this pompous, like, I'm just better than you because I've read 15 books this month kind of thing.
When you think about conceptually what it is to counterspell, like remove it from the idea of magic, right?
Yeah.
If someone is weaving a spell, like think of Dungeons and Dragons, right? If someone is casting a spell, I think... to me, it's always assumed that the ability to prevent someone from casting a spell must be more complex than the art of casting a spell. Right? You sort of...
Because that's, you know that to such an extent, you can break it apart.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. You understand the machinations that form the spell to an extent where you can say, yeah, I actually know the exact response to this spell that will stop it from occurring.
And I think like even like other really cool blue effects that kind of show off this side of blue is stuff like unblockable creatures. That's a really strong blue effect. Like you think of like Triton Shore Stalker, Mistcloak Herald, like all these creatures, very low to the ground, but unblockable. It's like you
Blinded
can't...
agent even.
Yeah, can't stop me from what I'm doing.
Interesting.
Another thing that blue does really well, in my opinion, is cloning effects. And I think that's a really strong, like, I've learnt this, so I can replicate it. You think of like Spark Double, Sakashima, all these like really good, bang, there it is, I've replicated what you're doing.
Yeah, it's almost like saying, I see what you're doing, but I think I can do it better than you can.
I mean, Spark Double literally comes in with a +1 counter on it.
Yeah, literally, my one's bigger than yours.
Yeah, that is a very blue quote.
My dad used to, when we would be becoming overly competitive, I grew up with two brothers, and my dad's a real rat bag, and when we would be being overly competitive with one another, Dad would sing a song that went, my one's bigger than your one, my one's bigger than yours.
I was really scared where you were going with that.
No, that's the whole song.
That's gorgeous.
That's blue to me.
That is actually like your dad quite bluntly being like, "Oh, hey, you realize what you're doing."
Yeah,
right?
Exactly right.
All right, continue down.
Sure.
We're going into black. What does black do really well?
Black is like... Black has so many resources and it uses them so freely. It's like, I don't give a shit. You know? I will sacrifice my own creatures. I will sacrifice my own resources, my life. I will take anything in order to progress my goals. And so, like sacrificing creatures is definitely something that comes to mind for black. And often the thing that you get when you sacrifice creatures in black is you get upside. You get, sacrifice creatures to scry 1 is like...
Visaris here. Woe Strider.
The card Read the Bones is interesting. Oh, yeah. That literally is taking the flesh of someone that has passed, or an
that
animal,
you've just peeled off.
A dead being. It's taking the resource that has been expended and saying, I can exchange this for knowledge of the future.
Yeah.
Almost sits a little bit in that blue camp, and so you see the similarities between them. But it's sort of saying like, no, I will sacrifice everything.
Yeah. I think that black also does something that's almost weirdly similar to what white does in terms of this life gain thing, but often in a life drain way.
Yeah.
It's like, if you think about, like, for example, Gary. Grey Merchant of Asphodel. He like ETBs and takes life from your opponents and gives it to you. It's like this.
He's a merchant as well, so he's sort of saying like, I get the better end of the deal. Yeah. I think the other card I was just thinking of like old cards. It's interesting that the old cards really capture it really strongly.
I think they really do.
I was thinking of Pestilence, the card that you play in your mono black Pauper Devotion deck, and Pestilence is literally like plague, but there's this interesting thing that with Pestilence, which is that you can effectively control the board when you have it. Like, you can sacrifice, you can pay life, you can pay mana in order to basically disease
regain
the
the
board.
advantage as well.
But interestingly, once everything dies, Pestilence goes too. And so there's this kind of, the life drain feels like this vibe to me, which is this like, I will sap every last morsel of value from everything that I have in order to find my victory. And, you know, I think you see this sometimes in Commander games where, like, my Queen Marchesa deck is, like, very based in black. It's an Aristocrats deck. And often my win looks like I have sacrificed every creature on my battlefield, but my opponents have lost.
And so, I've drained everyone and I win.
Yeah, at the cost of all my resources, I have emerged victorious.
Yeah. I also like how the whole what you said about Marchesa and how it's based in black. You said that it was based in. It's then like the other like sub strategies of life gain are like a sub theme to your deck. So it's like this secondary approach. It's interesting, but I think another thing that black does, which I'm not entirely sure. I mean, yeah, it does line with the color philosophy, but the necromancy about black, this reanimation of like your opponent's graveyards as well. Like, it's really good at just like taking something from your opponents that seems discarded and used and dead. Yeah. And you can gain it for your own advantage. Like, just think about like Animate Dead. Like, you're literally like pulling it out of the graveyard from your opponent's side to
well, to
run
me,
away with the game.
This again is that same philosophy of like, this resource has not been expended yet.
Yes.
I see that you have discarded this, but I know that there is more to be gained. So I will return the dead
in
order to further my goals.
It's like my dad with a Marmite jar.
There's more in there.
There's more in Marmite in
There's
that jar.
more in there. Give it to me. I'll bring it back.
My dad's a necromancer of Marmite.
Yeah,
that's cool to think about.
Exactly right.
So red. Moving on to red. What does red do well?
Red is chaotic. It's funnily enough, red gains access to a lot of the things that the other colors do, but in a really mechanically chaotic way,
or a hasty way, like it's needed now.
That's true. There's a very strong sense of speed in red. I mean,
haste as a mechanic is just like so common in red creatures.
Yes, it's like the quintessential red keyword for sure. I think like you sort of see. To be honest, I love that in red we're getting so many options of we call it impulse draw these days, which is these abilities to kind of draw cards because you sort of exile them from the top of your library, play them to the end of your next turn, play them to the end of this turn. Like, you have the ability to have access to them, but you're in a rush. It gives you this idea of like, you know, yes, I have the means of getting where I need to, but I only have so long. My flame might burn out. Even
the name like of the card, like Reckless Impulse. It's very red. It's reckless and it's impulsive. It's like I gotta do this now because I'm running out of time. I need to do it now.
The card Gamble, you know,
yes,
it literally says like in terms of mechanically in the game, it says like if I get the card I need, I win, more or less. But if I don't, I will lose it. And red does not get it back from the graveyard. So it's like literally a gamble, you know. I will stake it all in order to get there, but I don't know if I'm gonna get there because of this chaos, this feeling that the speed at which you're moving means that you must do it now, and you don't have
to land right.
And you don't have the ability to, like blue would, decide before you make the choice. You must make the choice now, and by virtue of making the choice now, it might be the wrong one. Yeah. And I love cards in red. Like I spoke about
Croc the Thumbless.
Croc the Thumbless is a great one. I love I spoke about extra turn spells and how they feel really blue, but in red we get a card like Final Fortune, which gives you an extra turn, but at the end of that turn you lose the game. And when I'm playing a deck and I cast Final Fortune, you feel this sense of like and all or nothing. I could not go more all in on this turn.
It is like putting all your chips into the front when you're playing
going
poker.
All in.
It's literally that push. And I think that Commander is such a beautiful way to see this because it's a social format. You're sat across the table from your opponent. If they're playing mono red and you're playing blue, that interaction you have with each other, like I take my extra turn, I spend 6 mana on my extra turn, I'll think about it carefully, I'll draw another card and I will consider my options very carefully. I've considered my options. Over to you, Walt. I'm going to cast Final Fortune and I'm going to try and win now! Like, that's it. It feels so, like, real, doesn't it? When you cast the spell, it's like, you got to win now, man.
I think that it's something so beautiful about the game that the feeling of the cards almost becomes like an inherent role play.
It
like,
is.
They imply narrative to such a strong degree because of the way that they work within the game. The good cards do, anyway.
I think as a good drama exercise, it would be great to have like a game of Commander where everyone plays a monocolored deck and you have to try and really embody when you cast a spell, you have to use the voice of green or use the voice of blue.
Interesting. Speaking of green, shall we look at what comes to mind for you about green?
Green for me immediately provokes growth, and that's the thing that I think of. So things like ramping in green, that land package, the rampant growth, the Kadama's Reach, the Cultivate. It's like this even in the art of the card, there's usually no people in the art. Like Kadama's Reach is literally like a tree kind of growing out. Yeah. Even Cultivate with the hand, it's touching the floor. It's this in touch with nature kind of thing. And again, with that growth, this mana growth, I also see it on the creatures with the +1 counters mechanic. It's like, that from your new Mau deck, good boy, he's going to grow, right?
Well, and the feeling that you get from the cards that grant you the counters is that, that it's growth that's being offered. And a lot of the cards that put +1 counters or increase the power of these creatures are called... Use the word growth in them.
Like Titanic growth.
Giant growth. Yeah. Like these cards literally say, I will grow
Hydra's
you.
growth.
Hydra's growth. There's so many. In terms of like the keyword, like we talked about haste in red. Yeah. Trample to me is the green keyword.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, it evokes haste literally says speed. Trample says... Trample. I will trample you. Like, you cannot stand in the way of a stampede. Yeah. So, like, and we have cards like Overwhelming Stampede. It's basically saying, like, if nature is allowed to run its course and grow as powerful as it can, it will trample over you. You cannot stand in its way, which I really like about green.
It's really cool. I love it when you start, when we've broken these colors down, we use words like, togetherness or unity, and then it's in a card, like the card name has unity in it for white, or we say growth and it's in it for green. So like when Mark Rosewater talks about this in a lot of his articles in Color Philosophy, and by the way, I have linked them in the show notes. You can go and have a look on these articles.
I'll have to have a look.
They're really, really cool to read. We've talked a lot about him, but he goes into more detail. One of the things that I really like that he talks about from a design perspective is personifying the colors.
Right.
And when you kind of try and put them in a person, you did it before with the Planeswalkers and what they embody, you get this sense of like, okay, what would blue do? What would blue do in this situation?
Right. And is this a question that Mark is like asking as he's designing cards? He's saying, would green do this?
He's even asking the other designers at Wizards of the Coast, is this a thing that black would do? Is this a thing that the color black, this personification of black, would cast? Do you know what I mean?
That's so human.
It's so cool. And I
anthropomorphize the colors of magic. That's so beautiful.
Wild. I would love to be a fly on the wall in a meeting room in Wizards of the Coast when they're trying to decide what color a card should be.
Yeah.
Because it would sound like a philosophy classroom, wouldn't it?
I almost wonder if the color would come first. And then it would they would design the card and go, hold on, now we need to stop and say, would green really do this?
Is this a green card?
Yeah, interesting.
I just find it incredibly impressive that throughout all of we went back to Aristotle and where his opinions came into what color meant. The fact that Richard Garfield has managed to set up a structure of philosophy in a game that can be explained to kids. Our game is 12 and up, right? So kids can learn about values, morals, wants, desires, hatreds through our game.
Well, and equally, I think it's so it's testament to the depth of the game that we've been speaking for an hour
Wild.
about. We've hardly talked about Commander.
Yes.
Like, we've just been talking about what we feel the colors do
Yeah.
in our experience of playing the game and seeing the way that the cards interact with one another. To me, that's just great storytelling.
I think it's fantastic.
If something can be accessible and interesting to any audience, but also when interrogated and when looked at really closely, widens and becomes quite complex and has a lot of depth to it. That to me is just really good narrative.
I think also, like you say, yeah, we haven't talked about much Commander, but you talk about the storytelling aspect. But for me, what we just talked about is Commander. It's this storytelling you have with the 3 other players at your table and the colors that your deck embody. That influences the stories that you'll tell later. Like, you know, when we say, oh, we played this great game, Walt had this incredible board of white soldiers, and we're like, he was overrunning the whole thing, but then, oh, James came in with this incredible black board wipe that he, like, paid a bunch of life into toxic delusion, ended the game. Like, see how, like, once you tell that story, the color philosophy kind of dives into it.
Yeah, I think I sort of alluded to this before, but the thing that's so beautiful about Magic is you can't divorce the storytelling from the mechanics.
No, you can't.
They are so integral to one another that literally in the course of, if you dispassionately described the way that a game unfolded, you would be still engaging in narrative.
Exactly.
Which is really, really cool.
Okay, well, speaking of Commander,
Sure.
let's actually talk about how this color philosophy affects our format specifically. Because everything that we've said affects every format.
Sure.
But there's something that's really special about our format that interacts with this color philosophy. And it's actually one of the first rules of Commander. And it's when you're building a Commander deck, you can only include cards that is in your Commander's color identity.
That's true. Commander actually quite specifically deviates from other formats in this way. If you're playing a basically any other game, if you have hybrid mana, for instance, a spell that like Reese the Redeemed that costs hybrid Selesnya, so either you can pay a white mana or a green mana for it. In every other format, you can play that deck, that card in a mono green deck. You can always pay the green mana for that cost if you would like to, and that's the way that mana is supposed to be represented. But Commander quite specifically says, no, we want you to feel the restrictions of color. So Reese is only legal in a Selesnya Commander deck.
For example, like I can play Titanic Growth in my Is It Blitz Pauper deck, even though it's a completely green card. I don't run any forests because I can pay the Phyrexian mana. It's really, really unique to Commander, and I think that I want to try and, in the monocolors, give you the epitome of what I think is representing a Commander in that color.
Oh, sure. So, like, literally, when we look at Commander and we look at the philosophy of each of these colors,
let's see if we can find a legendary creature.
The quintessential white Commander. Well, what to you is the quintessential white Commander?
Well, this is the thing. I spent a lot of time on this bit because I was a little bit intimidated by trying to epitomize one Commander for each color. So I'm going to throw to the listeners and say, if you disagree with me and think there's a better white Commander that represents white's philosophy, please tell me. I'm really interested.
Definitely.
But I went on to EDH Rec and had a look at the top commanders to see what's like the most commonly played. But in my opinion, for white, I found a legendary creature angel 2/2 flying vigilance called Giada Font of Hope.
Oh, this is a recent card,
It
right?
is from New Capenna.
Yeah.
So for 1 and a white, you get the angel 2/2 flying vigilance. Now here's where I think it epitomizes white. Each other angel enters the battlefield with an additional +1 counter on it for each angel you already control. And it taps for a white, and you can only use this mana to spend on casting an angel spell.
Well, angels are like the quintessential white creature.
Yes.
Definitely. I will not contest that at all.
Soldiers, I think, could be put in an argument there.
Yeah, but soldiers I consider very Boros. Like, there's a lot of red soldiers as well.
Correct.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I could see where you're coming from. And there's also this sense of the fact that it grants the angels the ability to be stronger together.
Yeah, the more angels you have, the stronger that angel that's coming in is.
Yeah, there's a sense of unity there. Yeah, I like that a lot. I think the only other card I would personally maybe throw in the mix for really embodying white is kind of a little bit similar.
Sure.
I think is his name Darien?
King Darien.
King Darien,
Yeah.
the 6-mana white creature that says whenever you're dealt damage, create that many soldiers.
Yeah.
I don't think it's quite as white as your one, to be honest, but it really says like the power of unity can't be overtaken.
Even
I am
if
the
we're
king.
hurt.
I am the king, and the more you damage my kingdom, the more powerful we become.
Yeah.
We cannot be resisted.
That's a good one. I didn't think of Darien. That's a
Darien,
really cool one.
I like the feel of Darien. When you play Darien, you
Yeah.
feel mono white really strong.
And it's really cool. You're like, go on, swing at me.
Yeah.
Okay. I love
But-
that feeling.
That this, I think, really epitomizes that more life gain part of mono white, which is really quintessential to white. So I like that. Yeah, I think I agree.
Alright.
What do you reckon for blue?
Blue, another recent card.
Okay.
From Kamigawa.
Mm-hmm.
One of the Praetors.
Oh.
So, Jin Gitaxias, Progress Tyrant. For 5 blue and a blue, you'll get a 5/5 Phyrexian Praetor legendary creature. That reads, whenever you cast an artifact, instant, or sorcery spell, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. This ability triggers only once a turn. It also says, when an opponent casts an artifact, instant, or sorcery spell, counter that spell. This triggers only once a turn.
Yeah, wow. I mean, it really feels like knowledge, like all-encompassing knowledge.
Yeah.
You know, the things that I know are duplicating as I know them.
Even the name Progress Tyrant.
Yeah, progress at any cost. It's very Phyrexian as
It
well.
is very Phyrexian.
But it also says you don't have the ability to keep up with the progress.
yeah,
You know?
I know more than you, so the fact that you're trying is cute. To me. Yeah.
No, I think I agree on that one. I think I agree.
You ready for black?
Of course.
I think this one was really easy for me.
Sure.
It's Crick, Son of Yawgmoth. It's 4 and Phyrexian black for a 2/2 horror minion with lifelink, and it says for each black in a cost, you may pay 2 life rather than pay that mana.
Sure.
So it turns every black pip into Phyrexian mana.
Yep.
When you cast a black spell, you put a +1 counter on Crick.
Interesting. I think you made one very slight mistake when you were reading the card. I believe it's called Post Son of Rich.
Ah, yeah. You made me look down at my phone and was like, did I read that wrong? No, there is a really cool secret layer of this.
There's a Post Malone themed secret layer, and it's literally Crick is just Post Malone.
It's Post Malone. He's like on a stage as well. It's really cool.
Yeah. Oh, I think that might be the
Bolus the Citadel. Yeah, that's
this
true.
one's very much him in the Crick Son of Yawgmoth,
Yeah.
but it's quite obviously Posty's face, which is
Really
kind of cool.
cool.
This I 100% agree.
This is a black card.
Paying life. This is about sort of cheating death, cheating the cost of things.
Well, even Crick himself, every time you do the thing, you are building him, and he has lifelink so he can go get you back that resource that you've spent.
Yeah.
He's very quintessential black to me.
Funnily enough, still in the realm of Phyrexia, because Yawgmoth was... Right? Yawgmoth's involved in the Phyrexians.
Well, he's completed, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yawgmoth's son, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yep. And what are you looking for red?
Well, red, actually, another recent card in the past couple of years, Laelia the Blade Reforged.
Oh, this is Strixhaven.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So, past 2 years, right? It came 2 years ago? Yeah, something around that?
Yeah.
So, for 2 and a red, you get a Spirit Warrior with haste that's a 2/2.
Yeah.
And whenever Laelia the Blade Reforged attacks, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Whenever one or more cards are put into exile from your library and or your graveyard, put a +1 counter on Laelia.
I'm seeing a recurring theme here with all of these commanders, which is that they perform a mechanic that is strongly associated with the color and reward you for doing so.
Yeah.
Crick gets stronger when you pay life.
Laelia gets stronger when you are hasty and action now.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I really like Laelia, and I agree that she really embodies that, yes, if you get lucky almost and do everything right now, Laelia can be busted in Commander. I watched a gameplay video where the Nitpicking Nerds, one of them was playing a Laelia Commander deck as the commander of the deck.
A mono-red Laelia deck.
Mono-red Laelia deck. And it was so strong and so fast.
The card advantage on it is wild. Yeah. It's insane.
But then once it got removed a couple of times and there was almost no cards in hand, it was suddenly oh, actually I've kind of burnt out. You know?
My candle has flickered and gone.
Yes, exactly right. What's your green?
Well, green was a bit of a bit of a hard one because
Sure.
there's so many green commanders out there that I think do a lot, and I've landed on Marwyn the Nurturer.
Ooh, this is like the elf tribal one, right?
Yeah, it is elf tribal. It's 2 and a green for a 1/1 that whenever another elf enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1 counter on Marwyn, and then she taps for an amount of green mana equal to her power. Now, this is why I think that it's like borderline almost going into White's philosophy a little bit. It
Sure.
wants to unify a lot of forces, but I think the thing that makes it super green to me is that she is growing slowly and naturally, and then she gets a payoff of power from growing so big. She produces
Yeah.
more mana the stronger she is.
Well, and she's literally growing, like
Yeah.
literally growing in power as the forces sort of like collect around her, and she's called the Nurturer, which I
Yeah.
think is interesting because
in the
it's like,
art, she's actually holding a baby elf,
yeah,
which is really cute.
So
Have a look
she's
at
sort
that.
of, you get this sense of growth is sort of impending, and she is bringing it about. And as she grows, so too does she grow the forest around her by producing green mana. Like
Exactly.
she's sort of requiring green mana to grow, or requiring creatures and life, but will give it back in the form of nurturing. And that feels very quintessentially green to me. I agree.
Yeah, there's actually, I think green was one of the easiest ones to see the philosophy in. There's
Yeah.
so many mono green commanders that can do the green thing really well.
We've spoken about green, like, I think more than any
Yeah.
other color this episode, because I think the flavor of it is so inherent in the cards. Like, not inherent, so obvious in the cards.
Yes, it's growth, it's natural, it's spiritual, it's power. And
Yeah, definitely.
All right, well, considering we know that commanders are very often not monocolored,
Yes.
I don't have a monocolored commander deck. Do I?
You do. You have your Bear Tribal.
I
deck.
have Bear Tribal,
Yeah.
which is actually pretty green, if you think about it. Yeah.
Very green,
Very
I would
green,
say.
yeah.
Literally makes bears bigger and then fights other creatures. Yeah, it's very quintessentially green.
So one out of my many commander decks is monocolored, and
Sure.
you used to have a Cranko deck, and now
Yes.
you've just built your mono-green
Mowu deck, yeah.
But all of our other decks are multicolored.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, it's
'Cause-
I think, the vast majority of commander decks are 2-color, I think.
Yes. I would
There's
say so.
still a lot of 3 and 4 and 5-color decks, but the absolute vast majority are 2-color, which I actually think I like, because I think when you start getting to the 3-color pairings, you start to dilute the flavor of each of them. It gets to the point where, like, I don't know if you've ever heard Teema, which is blue, green, and red, called Wet Gruel.
Yes.
Because,
Wet
like, it
gruel.
literally-
It's better at doing the gruel thing, and it's a little bit damp.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's literally, like, it's so obvious when you start to combine 3 colors. Sometimes it's just like the 2-color pairing that comprises, or one of the 2-color pairings that makes up the 3 colors, is so much more dominant that the other color seems like supplemental and unnecessary. But yeah, so I really like 2 colors specifically, because it feels like you get this really interesting give and take between the 2 colors.
Yeah.
Especially as we talk about, like, the difference between the allied colors and the enemy colors, because you the feeling you get of the colors coming together, like, I've got a couple of Selesnya decks, and the feeling of Selesnya is so harmonious. It's
Yes.
like, literally, you could almost think that white and green were the same color.
Well,
the
they
way these
share
cards
that
work.
common thing of, I want to bring the people together in this natural way and grow
Yes.
from it. And if you actually look in the artwork on our podcast, album art, you are in green and white,
I
which is
am.
the colors that you're attracted to. And for me, I'm in red and blue, which is the colors I'm attracted to.
Yes, but yours is an enemy color pairing, which is interesting. And
Yeah.
I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the feeling you get from, like, loving that enemy color pairing. 'Cause
So you get the feeling of like harmony and love
and
yeah.
really strong, like, cohesion between
Yeah.
my colors. Whereas my understanding of hearing you talk about blue red before is, like, you feel you get this strong benefit from each of the colors, but that they are sort of like a mishmash and kind of chaotic
Well, I mean,
mix.
I feel like in my brain, the way my brain goes about like its daily life is controlled chaos, which
Sure.
I'm a very busy person.
Yes.
I am constantly running around doing, I'm running a non-for-profit. I work full time. I'm doing this podcast. I try and stay fit. I have an active social life.
Yeah.
I play Commander
Yeah.
and I'm very, very busy. And I think if someone was to be put in my head for like a week. They would be like, there's so many things to remember here. Are you actually on top of any of them? And I feel like I am, because they're what I live in. And when I go to red blue as a color combination, I find that that's what it exemplifies.
Sure.
Like, you've seen just recently my Tornos artifact deck build.
Yeah.
There's so many options on my board. Yet every single time, at like the end step just before my turn, when I have that moment to activate a bunch of abilities on my board, I'm pretty good at just being like, right, I'm going to go this one, this one, this one, this one, get a bunch of benefits here, and move on.
Yeah.
You know.
Totally.
And I feel like that's what feels fun to me. It's like grasping life now and understanding why you're grasping it. Like,
Sure.
I'm quite educated on what I want to achieve in life. I know what I want, but it's that urge, that instinct of, I just want it now and get it. You know?
Interesting. Well, that really to me epitomizes blue-red, like mechanically in the way that it works, which is, it's immediate, but it's also... it's knowledge now. Yeah.
Yes,
knowledge now is like how I would think about blue-red.
Well, okay. Well, I have actually, funnily enough, found what I believe epitomizes an enemy-colored pairing and an allied-colored pairing.
Oh, sure.
Took me a very long time, because there's a lot more options here. A lot
there
more.
are. And a lot more mechanically different cards. Like, most mono-green cards have a similar vibe of being about creatures, and most mono-red cards read, you know, I'm attacking now, I'm hasty and stuff. But when you combine colors together, some color pairings these days have wildly different effects.
Yeah, I mean, even Strixhaven was meant to break the color pie.
Yeah, we had Lorehold,
the
red-white set that was all about using the graveyard and exiling cards from the graveyard, and normally Boros is all about combat. So that felt really, really different. So what's your enemy color?
Okay, well, enemy color, naturally, I had to choose a red-blue commander, surely. So I found a Ruth Tormented Prophet, which is also a recent card from, I believe... Crimson Vow is the set it was from. And it's a 2/4 legendary creature human wizard, and this is why I think it epitomizes the enemy, like the combat between red and blue, and blends it perfectly. It says, if you would draw a card, exile the top 2 cards of your library instead. You may play those cards this turn.
Yeah, I mean, that literally ties together like exactly how we described blue and red. Blue was about knowledge and was about considering your next choices, and literally in this instance, the addition of red is saying like, okay, I will take that knowledge, I will double it.
And speed it up.
But it must happen right now. The knowledge is now, you must use it, this is the time.
In the moment.
Yeah, I like that. I've not seen this card in the wild myself. I know you've seen it a couple of times in CDH, actually.
Yeah, and it's weird in CDH. As like a mechanic thing. CDH is very about, like, the hidden information you have is very valuable. Because you're exiling the cards you're drawing, everyone sees the combo win cons that are coming out of it.
Exile, for those who don't know, is a public zone unless it specifically says put something face down. So, when you exile something, everyone can see it.
Which is weird in CDH.
It is weird in CDH.
Here's my win con.
Do something about it. Now.
Very is it.
That is very is it. Yeah, I like that a lot. What was your allied color pairing?
Well, naturally, I had to go for Celestia white-green for the allied colors.
I'm flattered.
And I think that, actually, you'll recognize this commander because my partner runs this commander.
Oh, yeah.
It's Kyla, Sigardian Emissary.
The human tribal one.
Human tribal.
Cool.
So 3 green and a white, you get a human cleric 2/2 that says whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1 counter on Kyla. And other humans you control get +1/+1 for each counter on Kyla.
You know what's interesting about this is it seems like almost exactly halfway between the white commander and the green commander that we featured. Marwan got stronger with other creatures, but produced mana, and the white creature made everything stronger depending on how many you had. This is literally exactly halfway between. It says there's strength in numbers, but the strength comes from me. You know, I am the embodiment of nature and order, and I will make us strong together. I love white-green for this feeling that you get that everything is working together. Like, that nothing is a mistake. Everything is just growing in the correct directions, and it's just about weaving your way through the direction that the cards want to go. And this feeling, this like inexplicable feeling of unity that you get
Yeah.
and harmony specifically when you are playing white-green. I love it so much.
I'm so glad that you felt that with this commander, because when I saw it, I was just like, mwah, chef's kiss. This is exactly what the middle ground between the white of unity and the green of growth becomes.
Yeah.
It's the growth of all, right? It's
You know
really
what's
cool.
interesting that I've just found myself thinking about? Because I do love white-green, and I have a couple of white-green decks, and I play it a lot. But I actually play a lot of really different colors of Magic. And I was thinking about what you said about how, you know, when you play Magic, you sort of, you embody the values of the cards and the narrative that unfolds as you play them. And I was thinking about the fact that I own so many different colors, and I'm an actor.
That makes a lot. You're putting on the face,
which is
that
funny
makes a lot
because
of sense.
when I think about playing my different decks, and like when I go to a game store, I'll bring a box of 4 decks.
And usually you split them up. You
I
get
do.
like 4 very different decks.
Really different decks, and I think it's because even though I'm not like literally performing,
I'd love to see that.
I'd love to do that. There's a feeling of the nature and the mind state and the values that I embody when I play the particular colors, and I like being able to bounce between different ones and try on the different thought hats.
You've said before, like when you play, because like obviously what we've found is with Commander, it's such a self-expressive thing, and these colors are a really great way for us to self-express ourselves. When you play those green-white decks, that expresses a lot of what you believe to be true.
Yes.
And when you play it, you're very comfortable. But Kaza, it's mentioned, hooray. You've mentioned to me before that post games of Kaza, you almost want to break because it's too chaotic, too much, too many decisions to be made.
Yeah.
And it's almost overwhelming for you. So in the moment, sure, you're doing the acting of Kaza and you're slinging those spells, but like afterwards, Walt goes, ooh, that philosophy of gameplay didn't sit right with me.
Yeah.
You know?
That's true, actually. I think I totally agree with that. And I think this sort of speaks to, you know, color identity is integral to Commander. I saw a really interesting thread, it was a couple months ago now, by Jim from the Spike Feeders, who's now a member of the Rules Committee, Jim Lepage. Woohoo! We love Jim.
Yeah.
And he had a thread where he said, what is, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but what is the minimum amount of factors where Commander would still be Commander to you?
Oh.
So like what's the most you can strip away the rules, strip away the mechanics, strip away everything. What's like the barest minimum for you where it's still Commander? And to him, he said, I believe, color identity.
Yeah.
And the social nature of the game.
That is exactly what Commander is.
And I think he said, like, you know, you can strip away Commanders.
The Singleton format.
You can strip away Singleton. You can... I can't remember if he said Singleton. But anyway, other people said Singleton, but he said color identity. And I think I agree with that it is such a restriction on how you build your decks, but it's a restriction that fosters creativity. And I think it's a restriction that fosters thought and philosophy, really.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
And I think it's so special to Commander.
Definitely. Completely agree.
Well, color is actually a lot more than just a way to differentiate game mechanics of a game. It's influenced by hundreds of years of understanding of how color reflects human values. In no other format is it more prominent than in Commander, because we're bound to only use the colors of our commander. So, Space Commanders, command received, and awaiting further instructions. We'll look forward to hearing from that different voice.
Well, we'll know if we hear from that voice again that it's time to
get commanded in a philosophy way.
Yeah, and dive into the color. Well, listeners, do you feel commanded? What do you think of the colors of Magic? And have we illuminated any of the mechanics of the game to you? And actually, I really want to know what colors of Magic really embody your values, and what's the feeling you get when you play those colors in games of Commander as well.
I actually want to know exactly that, but also what happens when you play not your colors? Like, do you get that feeling that Walt gets when he plays Is It and go, oh, that was too much?
Yes. No.
I'm curious.
Definitely. Well, you can send us an email, you can add us on Twitter, or you can join our Discord that we mentioned earlier and chat with us and other members of our our play group. It's really the best way to keep the conversation going when you finish these episodes. We've got lots of people leaving really wonderful comments and starting really wonderful discussions in there. Me and James are weighing in pretty much on a daily basis with our thoughts. So
I'll usually get home from work and there's like a string of missed messages that I enjoy sitting down after work and being like, oh, someone's listening to an episode and has thought about everything we've said. It's really cool.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to talk to you as well. And also, if you have the time, if you could leave us a review on whichever platform you listen to us on, so Spotify and Apple Podcasts are the two that's the easiest. You can just click on our page and leave us a review. That would be really, really great. It's not an option on Google Podcasts for some reason.
Well done, Google.
Yeah, I don't know, Google. So if you listen to us on Google, just tell all your friends, all 10 of them, that you listen to our podcast.
And if you listen on Apple Podcast, tell all 3 of them.
Yeah. Restricted on Apple to 3 friends, of course.
It's actually something they get you to sign when you sign up. Because you know the Spotify Apple Music debate. Anyone that listens to Apple... Because I listen to Apple Music and I get looks in the street when I listen to Apple Music.
I can believe that.
Yeah.
We'd also like to say a special thanks to Palms Off Gaming for sponsoring our podcast. They create some really fantastic deck boxes, sleeves, binders, and other gaming accessories. We use their sleeves. We love them. They're based in Melbourne. We've met them before. A bunch of the guys there. They're all really lovely, and we really love all the stuff that they do. We can't wait to see more. It feels like every couple of months they're releasing some new product.
I just got an email from Darcy, one of the founders at Palms Off Gaming, and they've just had to move warehouse. They need a bigger space. They're creating so much stuff.
Wow.
So if you want to help them empty it, head to palmsoffgaming.com.au.
Yep. Help them empty that warehouse. Sure.
All right. Well, it is tradition at the end of every episode. We got a planeswalk out of here. Talk about something else. Where are we going this week?
We're going to the realm of Roshar.
Yeah, no, where? I'm sorry.
Well, it's actually a little bit magic related. It's a world that was created by Brandon Sanderson, who famously plays Magic the Gathering, has a cube that he takes to a lot of Magic events.
I've heard this name float around.
He's been an avid Magic fan for a long time. He's been on game nights.
And we're meant to planeswalk away from Magic.
Well, the thing is, he's a fantasy writer. He writes these really quite successful novels.
Yeah.
And I've been reading... I'm forgetting the name of the series itself, but the first book is called Way of Kings. I'm currently reading Words of Radiance, which is the second one.
Yeah.
I actually am so in love with this series. I just bought a Way of Kings playmat. I think I showed it to you before.
Oh, yeah, sick. No, the art is gorgeous.
The cover art's really cool.
Yeah.
He's got a particular artist that he uses. But yeah, basically, like, it's a world where there are these things called high storms, which are like thunderstorms that we experience, but they are so harsh that basically all the world is rock. There is no soil, and the only plants that grow must be able to endure, like basically like almost tsunami storm weather.
Wow.
But also there's like this there's these creatures called Spren, which are like literally, it kind of ties in well with this episode actually. They are like physical representations of human ways of conceptualizing and organizing ideas.
Oh, that's cool.
So when someone's afraid, that fear Spren will appear near them, and they're kind of like sprites or fairies or something.
Yeah, like I'm imagining they like poof into existence kind of thing.
Little tiny beings that are like, but there are particular ones that embody particular states. So there's fear Spren, there's confusion Spren, there's a lot of like stuff going on at the moment with glory Spren.
Oh.
And yeah, like one of the main characters so normally Spren just are kind of these little beings that you can see them, you can see they're kind of humanoid-ish sometimes, but you can't interact with them. One of the main characters has this particular Spren who's been following him around and has begun to talk to him.
I'm assuming, and that's a very special thing that's not happened before.
Sometimes Spren will say be very cheeky. They're kind of like fairies.
Like almost Pokemon type. They have like a couple of phrases.
Cheeky little sort of things. But this one has developed a conscience and a consciousness and communicates with him and actively sticks with him. I won't go beyond that because I don't want to spoil anything, but there's like really this really cool feeling, sort of like Lord of the Rings, of this like grand unveiling fantasy, lots of moving parts.
And a lot of lore by the sounds of it.
Heaps
Big
of
world.
lore, heaps of lore. I'm not even touching the surface of how
So cool.
complex the world is, but you have this really strong feeling that it's all heading somewhere.
Ooh.
But at the moment, you're in that kind of spot in like a mystery story where they're just disparate elements, and you're kind of like, what's the relevance of this? It's one of those like really big, like long novels that has all these interludes, like where they're different characters that you
Like,
haven't met before.
Take a chapter off and talk
Yeah, like
about
just
something
like
completely different.
one chapter from the perspective of someone on the other side of the world, but who's encountering a different kind of spren and noticing something. There was like one interlude where there was a couple of scientists who were studying spren
Wow.
and had found basically like to me it was like a strong allusion to the tests of atoms and the way that they interact when they're being observed, which is that they basically had exactly the same thing. When the spren were observed, they behaved differently. Anyway, it's like this whole grand, complex thing. It was really hard to start. I was like, what on earth is going on? But as you
the
read
more
more
you
and
live
more,
in the world,
you're like,
the
oh my
better it
god,
gets
I
better.
want to know everything. I just like,
cool.
Yeah, I'm literally looking forward to when you go home in a second. I get to read some more. I'm so sorry.
Well, we'll pack up the podcast now and we'll let you go back to reading.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, that is the end of the episode. I'm really looking forward to the rest of these episodes.
Oh yeah, I want to talk about White. I mentioned that'll be the first one up.
Wooberg. Let's do it.
Sounds good.
Goodbye, Commander players.
Bye.